We are now in section 2, the value streams and processes dimension for the service desk practice. Of the 20 questions in the exam, there will be 5 questions from this topic. These would be process questions and value stream questions, and a mix of understanding and application questions, meaning Bloom's Level 2 and Bloom's Level 3 type of questions respectively. The exam syllabus is to understand the process details for this practice. In particular, the inputs and outputs of each process and also the key activities and their meanings for each of the processes. And then we will conclude with how this practice contributes to the value streams of the organization, and then also a generic methodology for value stream analysis and improvement, and how that generic methodology for value stream analysis and improvement applies to the service desk practice. There are 3 processes in the service desk practice. As we know, this is a communicative practice. Therefore, we have the user query handling, then communicating to users, and service desk optimization as the 3 processes here. The first one we will deal with is the user query handling process, in which it is ensured that the user queries are captured, validated, and triaged for further processing. Triage meaning categorized. This table has been taken from the practice guide, which depicts the inputs, activities, and the key outputs for this process. The inputs and outputs have not been explained in the practice guide, so it is for us to interpret in our own way, and that is generally straightforward. Because it's a user query handling process, the key inputs naturally would be the user queries, and then also guidelines and procedures for how to triage those queries into different categories. While doing that, the service desk agents should be able to refer to the service management records, for example, incident, change, problem records, and so on. They will also need access to service information such as service configuration information, IT asset information, and any other relevant information based on the nature of the query. The outputs in this case would be the recorded and categorized users queries, because there's going to be logging of the query, validation, and triaging or categorizing of the query. Then the processing for the categorized user queries will also be initiated, and that is also reflected as a key output. So the activities here are straightforward. The first step is to acknowledge and record the user query. This will be done by the service desk agent. Then the query is validated. We will see what that means. Then the query is triaged, categorized, meaning, and the appropriate activities are initiated through the relevant practice. It could be, for example, the incident management practice or service request management, or maybe other, such as deployment, release, change, and so on. This is the process workflow for the user query handling process. The diagramming notations are based on the business process management notation diagram. We wouldn't be concerned with the notation here. We only have to acknowledge or understand the various activities and the sequence of the activities in this process, while we have already understood the inputs and outputs in the previous slide. Nevertheless, the envelope symbol is about when a message is sent to one person. A triangle means when a message is given to an entire team, and the pentagon here means it's a multiple events happening at the same time. So the first step is to acknowledge and record the query, where the record is created or logged. That is, then the query is validated. We will see what that means. If it's not possible to validate, the process ends here. Otherwise, the query is triaged, and the appropriate activities based on the query are initiated. Throughout this process, the user query record is updated. So what do these really mean? The first step, acknowledging and recording the user query. In general, users expect a quick response from the service providers, service agents, service desk agents. And therefore, they may want to contact the service desk by phone or email, chat, walk-in channels, etc. And human interaction provides more empathy as compared to a technology interaction. But technology interactions could be faster. So query, whenever it is reaching a service desk agent, The response should be in a polite and standard manner so that the users are satisfied with the level of quality shown by the service desk agent, and that the query is welcomed by the service provider. And here the key thing is that every interaction must be recorded in a query log or a workflow tool. And therefore, to encourage the recording of the queries, the agents will need some incentives. Otherwise, they might think that verbal interaction is sufficient enough. The records will be useful afterwards for improvement purposes or sometimes even for audit purposes. So the main thing here from an exam perspective that you have to know is there's a recording of the query or the query is logged. When it is automated, then that can also be automatically logged. The user can type in some digits on a phone, and that may take them to a specific query. For example, I could call up a help desk and press a button to download a document or check my bank balance, for example. So that is all automated. Usually for this, we will need a chatbot or a IVR system. And that system should provide options so that the right categorization can be done by the user and they will get the response automatically. This can also be useful for important announcements to be made to multiple users regarding maintenance or downtime information. And because it's automated, the validation can be done right away. On the next slide, continuation, that is. The self-service systems on the right side, in the rightmost column, that is, just to conclude, they can record the query automatically and inform the user that their query has been logged or registered. Then the next step is about validating the user query. Validation here means to perform certain checks. For example, to check whether the individual is who they really are by asking for some identification, a number, or whatever, and whether the user is eligible to consume or request that service, or because it's possible that sometimes users who are not associated with a certain customer contract may make a request or provide queries, and those would not be serviced. And it should be as per the agreement of what kind of queries can be asked to the service desk as well. And in some cases, the user may have to provide some confidential information. So there should be, apart from when providing their identity, and those should be taken care of also. In case of automated situation, in the rightmost column, the validation would be automatic. It can be based on, for example, sending a PIN to a user, and they may have to type it in for automatic response. The last paragraph on the previous slide in the rightmost column, that continues here at the top entry in the rightmost column. So in the case of automation, the users will be presented with the applicable service offerings based on their eligibility, role, etc. during the validation. And for the human interaction during the validation, the service desk agent will be responsible for the complete validation of the user and their query. Then the last step is to triage the user query and initiate the appropriate activities. Triaging meaning categorizing and directing to the required practice, such as incident management or service request management, or maybe others. In fact, the service desk personnel are generally involved in those value streams as well. For example, incident classification, fulfilling a service request. It depends on what the scope of their service desk personnel activities are. And therefore, in such cases, the triaging may be followed by the service desk agent resolving then and there. Otherwise, they may have to assign it to somebody else for further processing through another practice. In case of automation, this can be automatically transferred, for example, for incident handling, rather than manually transferring to an incident handler, and so on. Finally, triaging the user query, continuing on the same for the automation part. In case of automation, the experience to the user should be positive. They shouldn't feel that automation is difficult for them to understand, and otherwise they will prefer human interaction all the time. Automated systems can do well by suggesting self-help guides based on the nature of the query. In some cases, automation may require some human interaction as well.